I met a woman who has raised 4 kids, and she wanted to go back to college. She wanted to get a college degree, and she wanted to start, her own career. And all her friends were like, "Well, why do you want to do that?" And she had to find the people who are like, "That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's amazing." And so rewiring, using that word again, your friendship, and that might also include family, is to build the support system that's going to be the lift for you to go to the places where you want to go.
Welcome to the Midlife Chrysalis podcast with Chip Conley, where we explore how midlife isn't a crisis, but a chrysalis, a time of profound transformation that can lead to the most meaningful chapter of your life.
Welcome to the Midlife Chrysalis. This is Chip Conley, and I'm going to introduce you today to a brother from another mother, somebody who, Michael Clinton, who is sort of famous in the media world. He was the president of Hearst Magazines for many years, helped to start Oprah Magazine, maybe the most famous and successful magazine launch in history. And then he actually, in his later life, decided that he wanted to explore longevity and wrote a book called Roar, Roar, which became a bestseller. So he's an MEA faculty member. I think you're going to enjoy this conversation we did in person at the MEA campus here in Santa Fe. Michael Clinton, you're here on campus because you're teaching with me.
It's amazing. It's so great to be here and be with you. And there's amazing New Mexican air.
Yeah.
I love being here. It's great to see you, Chip.
You've had a home here for 18 years.
18 years. I built a home here because I had a Santa Fe moment when I was in my 20s and said, my soul belongs here somehow, someday, some way.
Wow. Let's go back there. What was going on?
No, I was living in New York, starting my publishing career. And I came out to visit a couple of friends who had relocated here. I'd worked with her. She was a journalist, and he was a film editor. And I was out for a run. You'll love this. It's a very Santa Fe story. I'm out for a run up near St. John's College, and I look at the hills above me and the sky, and I'm like, this place is just amazing.
Yeah.
I belong here. So over the years, I'd come here all the time. Would come for Indian Market or come for a trip to ski, whatever, and built this house. And one day after the house was built, I'm out running, and I'm sort of running out towards St. John's College, and I look up, and there's my house in the mountains where I had the Santa Fe moment.
Wow.
I was like, subconsciously, I built a house where I had the moment, but I didn't realize it.
Oh.
Very Santa Fe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway. And that was how long ago? That was.
Well, I'm a proud 72-year-old. So call it, when I first came, 45 years ago.
More than 45 years ago.
Yeah.
In the workshop that we're doing together, we were talking about your father and how you grew up in Pittsburgh and, very, very humble roots, grew into becoming president of Hearst Magazines and, a bon vivant.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about your dad, because he passed away not long ago.
Right. This past summer.
Yeah. And let's explore our fathers for a moment, and then let's go quickly to your history and the career in the publishing world.
Well, my dad was my amazing supporter, role model, everything rolled into one. He was an amazing dad. We, as you said, we came from very humble beginnings. My dad was a laborer. My mother was a homemaker. Was raised in a working class neighborhood in Pittsburgh. I shared with you.
Did you know Andy Warhol?
I guess I knew of him, certainly.
He's a little older than you.
He lived on the other side of town, but certainly he was one of the celebrities that we knew growing up, came from where we came from. But, there were like 350 kids who went to my high school, and I think 10 of us went to college. I mean, it was a very steel workers, it was a steel town. And so, but my father, who was a high school graduate, was, every Friday night we had a trip to the library and we would be able to take out 5 books, and he took us to museums and to art exhibits. And he just had a influence on me. And there was a momentous moment when I was 16. I was surrounded by these big steelworker kids who became the football players. I couldn't compete. I wasn't, 300 pounds. And so I was very frustrated. I ended up running track and cross country as my sport.
Yeah.
But my dad knew I loved words and loved reading, and that he taught me. And one day he showed up with a typewriter as a birthday present and said, I think maybe you should think about writing and being a journalist, and gave me a typewriter, which was like a huge gift, and also set me on a course.
Yeah.
Set me on a course. And it was a validation from my dad that my brain was what was going to get me. It wasn't going to be my brawn.
Yeah.
It was going to be my brain that was going to push me forward.
So my father had the opposite response. When I was 12, I said I wanted to be a writer. When I grew up, my dad made me feel like, okay, that's not a very reputable career. And I love my dad, deeply love my dad. I've talked about my dad on this podcast when I was interviewing Scott Eastwood, whose dad, Clint. It's beautiful that your father saw in you a skill that was maybe an unusual skill, and especially an unusual skill in terms of the upbringing that you had.
Yeah.
But he really deeply wanted you to find that calling. And
yeah. My dad is the son of Irish immigrants, and the Irish, we Irish. I have an Irish passport as a result of my grandparents being born there. The Irish are very poetic,
for sure,
and they're very interested in ideas and literature and all those things. And even though my dad was a high school graduate, he still had the curiosity of an intellect that I would say. And so I think he recognized something in me that maybe he had that he wasn't able to really develop because he had his first child when he was 20. So he didn't have a lot of flexibility, let's call it. And they had 6 children. And so putting food on the table was his priority.
Yeah.
But I think if I think back now, it's, the Irishness, because he would read the Irish poets and read, stories about Ireland. So I think there was, you see where I'm going on that? I think there was a bit of that in there.
Yeah. So you then went to New York to pursue a publishing career.
Yeah.
Ultimately led to becoming the president of Hearst Magazines and overseeing. In fact, you helped launch Magazine, Oprah's magazine. Talk about like the glitter of the later years, and then go backwards a little bit. Let's go back to when you were in your 20s and starting to build a career in publishing.
Yeah, so I had a storied career, literally starting from the bottom, and became the president and publishing director of Hearst Magazines, and I was the chairman of the Magazine Publishers of America, and I was able to really live in so many ways, both the glory days of magazine publishing before digital came along and disrupted everything, and then the digital days, which transformed it. But during that period, our team, we launched Oprah's Magazine, which was the most successful magazine launch in history, which was quite phenomenal. And she was an amazing North Star. And Gail King still works with our company with OprahDaily.com. We launched Food Network Magazine. We launched HGTV Magazine, huge successes off of those franchises. We bought Hachette Publishing, which was Elle and Elle Decor and other properties. We bought Rodale, which was men's health and women's health. So we built this global, because we were a global company. The team, we had a great global team that really ran the business. And it was, there was once this line I read many, many years ago: if you live the life of who you want to become, you will become that person. And I remember being a young publishing person saying, I want to dream big and I want to go to the top of my business. And, I was fortunate. It's a lot of luck and timing and skill and opportunity. It's an alchemy of things. It's not one thing. But I got to the top. And ultimately, when we built the Hearst Tower on 57th Street, which was Norman Foster's first big project in America, my office was on the 43rd floor overseeing Central Park. And sometimes I would just stop and look there and say, wow, this kid from Pittsburgh did okay. Yeah.
Along the way, did you have a midlife chrysalis? Did you have a moment in your 30s, 40s, 50s where you wondered what it was all about?
Yes, I was 39.
Okay.
And I was the publisher of GQ. Great job.
You got great clothes out of that, didn't you?
Did you get great clothes? I was never really into clothes per se, but I learned.
Okay.
I was 34 when I became the publisher of GQ. I was the youngest publisher in the industry. And, it was very heady because of all the trappings. And there I was having dinner with Cary Grant, literally, and meeting Michael Jordan and having dinner at Armani's house and, pretty flying to Concorde.
Yeah.
I mean, it was all pretty the 80s.
Yeah.
It was all pretty great. And I was very ambitious and I was, wanted to be successful. And so we were successful. But when I was 39, I sort of had this, what you would call your word, chrysalis.
Chrysalis. Either
Chrysalis,
way,
thank you. Because I stepped back and I realized that all I did was working. I had a great personal life, a great family life, but all I was doing was working, and I was the most boring person I knew. And, everyone looked around and said, well, you have this glamorous job. And yeah, it's work. It's work. And I had a boss at the time. I was feeling very full of myself once coming back from a trip to Europe, telling him of all the things that I experienced. And he said, I just want to remind you of something, said he. You sit in a rented seat, and the seat you sit in should not be the seat as to who you are. And that was like a lightning bolt that hit me right in the middle of my brain, because so many people, so many of us identify ourselves by a seat we sit in, a work seat in particular. And if you work for a company, that is a rented seat. And so at 39, I said, I better get a life. And I better start dimensionalizing who I am, because, the publishing world is treacherous. I mean, you could walk in tomorrow and get fired. I mean, it was very treacherous terrain, sort of, highly competitive. There were probably 5 people who wanted my job, who in the company.
Only 5
in the company,
I think
right?
A lot more than that, yeah.
And then outside the company. So, it was a very highly competitive, highly pressured job. And so you're as good as your numbers and as your performance as any business is. And I had to sit back and say, here I'm at 39, about to be 40. What do I do? And I had this thing in me that I always had this sense of adventure. So I decided for my 40th birthday to get a group of friends together to go climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And I also said at the same time, I'm going to really push the envelope, and I'm going to go take a race car driving class at Skip Barber in Connecticut, take some clients so I could get expensed, right? And take a flying lesson. I was always interested in flying. My dad would always say, when are you going to do that flying lesson? You've been talking about it forever. So I took a flying lesson, and I ultimately became a pilot, private pilot. And ultimately climbed a lot of mountains. I didn't really like the race car driving thing, but I decided to build what I call a layer in my life around adventure travel. And I became an adventurer, and I said my 40s are going to be my adventure years. And I developed this whole different identity that got me through what we would say is that midlife moment. And so here I am, 32 years later, I've taken over 30 adventure trips with a group of friends or my adventure travel group. And it became an identifier. So there are other layers that I built. When I stepped out of my day-to-day of my big fancy career, I didn't go off the cliff like so many people do. I had built so many
you had a multidimensional life.
I had built so many identities that, if I was, and I was ready to say that was a phenomenal career of 40 years, but that was then. So I got to move forward.
If you're enjoying the conversations we've been having on the Midlife Chrysalis, I have a valuable offer for you to consider. My book, Learning to Love Midlife, 12 Reasons Why Life Gets Better with Age, is a national bestseller. And right now, you can get a copy for just the cost of shipping. It offers stories, research, and practices to help you move from a midlife crisis to a midlife catalyst and see this stage of life not as a decline, but an opportunity to flourish. Claim your copy today at meawisdom.com/midlife book. So let's explore this. So you actually retired. Well, you didn't retire. Let's actually. You hate that word. Yeah,
we'll get to that.
We'll get to that. So you shifted. Yeah. You actually moved out of being a publishing industry senior executive, a president, and at 67, you decided you actually went to Columbia to get your master's in nonprofit management.
Correct.
And you ultimately wrote a book called Roar, which we're going to come back to. You then created a company and now have a whole team called Roar Forward in the B2B space, which we'll talk about. you decided to run over the course of the last 15 years or so, to run 7 marathons on 7 continents.
Yes.
Uh, are you the most interesting man in the world? I
No.
like,
No,
isn't that the Dos Equis guy? I mean, like,
right. When I was 66,
yeah.
and I knew that when you're done, right? You know when you're done with anything. You know when you're done with you know when you're done with a relationship. You know when you're done with a job. You know when you're done. I was kind of ready, and I went to our CEO, who's a great guy, and said, "Steve, I'm ready to build my transition plan out of the seat that I was in." And I also was this highly, challenging intellectual role, and every day being inspired by something different. And so I said I needed to build a bridge to when I got out of there, I had something that was really going to keep me busy. So I did start. I had studied economics and political science in school. I did an MBA years ago, but I was always interested in the nonprofit philanthropy world because I have a lot of involvement in that world. I have my own foundation, other things that we started. And I said, it'd be interesting. So I'll take a course or two. Well, what happens in the course or two that I was interested in, you had to apply for a master's degree. So I'm like, well, okay. Got my transcripts, got my letters of recommendation, applied, got in, and started this master's degree at 66, 67. And 12 courses, capstone project. And it was really humbling in a way and inspiring in another way. But I knew that it was going to invigorate me. And lifelong learning is such an important part of living longer. You know that. Yep. I felt at 67 that I had another 25, 30 years ahead of me. And I wanted to have a whole other kind of dimension to my life. I didn't know where I am today is not what I planned. I didn't, it all kind of grew organically. I wish I'd say I had this big grand plan but the beauty of it is sometimes you don't have a grand plan and things take you places.
It's iterative and you have to be faithful to the calling.
The idea. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah.
And so Roar came out of this time, and you had written books before, but you'd never written a book like this book, which was about the second half of life and about how do you curate a life that's interesting. So can you actually give us the acronym and explain a little bit more about Roar?
Sure. So the concept of Roar was first developed with this idea that everyone kept saying, oh, you're going to retire. And I kept saying, no, well, I'm going to retire from this job, but I'm not going to retire. Retirement and the word retire has so much baggage attached to it because it is, first of all, as I always say, it's a false construct. It was created 100 years ago by the US government and Social Security. Prior to that, there was no such thing as retirement. You basically worked until you died. And by the way, life expectancies were only, 50, 60, pick a number, 62, 100 years ago. So we built.
Well, and your father was a laborer. I mean, so for many people, the idea of retirement after a lifetime of labor or a lifetime of mind-numbing administrative work.
Absolutely.
Like, no, send me to Sun City, please.
Yes, my dad was very happy to be that person.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And yet now today we are knowledge workers. So many of us are knowledge workers. The idea that at 60 or 62, we're supposed to turn off our brain and go to some retirement community where we're just going to golf and drink martinis at lunch. I mean, that just is not what most people want.
I don't think listen, it works for some people.
Yeah.
Right. And kudos to them.
And they live in Florida.
And they live and do 30 years of that. And kudos to them, But for most people, especially educated professional, managerial, knowledge worker types, it doesn't work for them anymore.
Yeah.
And so I started agitating about this because everyone would say you're going to retire. And I hated that word. And I said, no, actually, I'm going to rewire.
Yeah.
Which became my word and became the sort of genesis of the book Roar, which is how do you take the second half of a life or even at 65, and roar is such a great word, right? It's just an action word that everyone can relate to. And the acronym was, the first R was this whole idea of reimagining. If you are 65 and healthy and you're going to live 30 years, how do you reimagine what that 30 years can be like? And how do you break out of the sort of social construct that was given to us? And that's going back to school, launching a business, getting remarried, has so many dimensions to it, as opposed to oftentimes the self-imposed ageism of, well, I can't do that now because I'm 65 or 70 or pick a number. So the reimagination process was sort of the building of it. The O, which was own your numbers. We live still in America mostly in a very ageist environment.
Yep.
Asia, parts of Europe, completely different. I mean, I always tell people, go to Singapore and see the celebration of
they call them the pioneers.
Amazing.
The young
Absolutely.
people from the time that Singapore became a country state,
right,
city state. They love their pioneers.
Exactly right.
Who are now in their 70s.
Exactly right. And they're age innovators, and the whole country is structured from government to public-private partnerships to infrastructure to retraining, schooling, healthcare systems, all the above. And there's not this built-in ageism that we have here. The U.S. is evolving and changing. We're seeing it play out with all these great. I always use the famous analogy of the Golden Girls in the TV show were in their 50s. Look what they look like.
Yeah, and
the Sex and the City girls, we all know that, right? Yeah. But look at, the women who are 70s and 80s today. I mean, look at, Oprah Winfrey or Gayle King or Jane Fonda, or, we could go through a list.
Helen Mirren.
Amazing role models in terms of what the celebrity of yesteryear were, the dowdy grandmothers who cultivated that look.
Is the publishing industry getting this?
Yes. Well,
because in many ways, I'm going to point the finger back at you and say, like, hey, the publishing industry was one of the problems.
You're absolutely right. And the publishing industry and the fashion industry and the beauty industry but yes, we as a company, our editors, I'm so proud of how they have integrated age diversity into their fashion spreads, into their feature stories, onto covers. We have had people of all ages on the covers, both on the women's magazines and the men's magazines. So, and you're seeing it in television with the Golden Bachelor and Matlock and so many of and Hacks with Gene Smart, right? And you're seeing it. I'm so happy I don't have to go to fashion shows anymore.
Yeah,
it was three
to hang out with Anna Wintour.
I think my assistant said to me, "You've been to the European fashion shows over 100 times." I would go there to do business with the CEOs so I wouldn't necessarily go to the shows. I'd go to some, but I would go to do business and have business meetings. But this past season, it was one of the most age diverse on the runway of any season. It was really fantastic. So there's change in the air, which is great in terms of the role modeling that implies that this is a different thing. But the point was, own your age. Be proud of it. You and I've talked about. So
just to be clear, we're now at the O. So we have
reimagining.
Reimagining.
Own your
age.
And you and I both know Becca Levy, who did the amazing research that so much of your attitude about age gives you 7.5 more years of great life. You probably know Eleanor Mills in the UK, who created the Queen Agers movement. I love Eleanor, and and we have to be pro-age, men and women.
And Ellen Langer, her work at Harvard, when taking a bunch of, I think it was just men, older men, putting them in a New Hampshire, big old home together, and then helping them just through little cues of Elvis Presley posters on the wall and music playing, and helping people to sort of see, like, wow, maybe I'm age fluid. Now she wouldn't have said that, but age fluid means that you're all the ages you've ever been or will ever be.
That's right.
I used to call it ageless, but I don't like calling it ageless, because then if something's a good thing and it's less, it means that's a bad thing. Right. And it means age is a bad thing.
Well, words are incredibly important.
So let's talk about the words, and then we'll get back to the A and the R in a moment.
But so we've built a vocabulary in our business. We work with a lot of CMOs and marketing companies and advertising groups and so forth. And, words are so important in terms of triggering things. So, when we talk about, age appropriate, it's really should be person appropriate, right? It should be flatlined, right? Yeah. I hate 60 is the new 40.
I do too.
60 is the new 60.
Yeah.
I hate younger next year. Sorry. I know it's the title of a book, but don't be younger next year. Own it. Be proud of it. Yeah. So language we don't talk about midlife crisis. We talk about midlife awakening.
Mm-hmm.
We don't say retire, we say rewire. So, we have a litany of vocabulary. And also, what happens with that is the imagery that goes with it,
Yeah.
right? And so we at Roar Forward, we identify 12 ad campaigns a year that celebrate and recognize the new attitude and the new approach to marketing to people over 50. And you know this better than I do. The population right now is 35% is 50 plus. The first millennials turn 50 in 4 years.
Yeah.
The enormous amount of income and money, and marketers tend to stop targeting people at 54. That's the 20th century media construct, which is crazy, right? Yep. So how do you blow that up? And then how do you start creating advertising and commercials and print advertising that are age diverse, but represent people of later ages in contemporary modern ways? Yeah. So we can go on our website, roarforward.com, and see the 12 campaigns that we identified for last year. We have a new set this year. But that's the kind of thinking that we all need to create this owning your age mentality.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now we're moving on to A.
So A is the action plan, right?
Yeah.
So we trademarked a program called Life Layering, and it really came from that story I told you of being that 39-year-old that in the first half of your life, you've built, we like to say, the 3 Ps. You have 3 personas that you're totally wrapped up in: your profession and your work, because you're working, presumably; your partner, because most people in their younger years are partnering up in one way, shape, or form; and if you choose to be a parent, you're a parent. And so those 3 Ps suck all the air out of the room.
Yeah, there's not much space for anything else.
There's not much space. Yeah. And so what happens is people get to mid-career, midlife, pick a number, 47, 50-ish, and all of a sudden they step back and say, oh my God, the kids are about to leave, if they had kids at a younger age. My company's been bought, sold, reorganization, downsizing. What's in it for me in the future? And if you've been married, you might say, is this the right person for me?
Yeah, listen, empty nest can be a very painful time for a lot of people, because who are you?
Who are you and who am I?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we built this thing called life layering in terms of how do you build the personas of your future? So the muscles that give you other identities. And it's not meant to be a one-off. It's meant to be a layer cake of identities. And you might choose one thing, and then you start going down that path, and then you build another layer. And so the messages, by the time you're at 65-ish, because if you work for a company, there will be an end date to that profession. It's just
it happens.
Whether it's 65 or 70, it's being pushed out further. It's going to happen. But then who are you? And how do you identify yourself?
What kind of path are you carving through midlife? Our free Midlife Pathfinder quiz helps you discover which of 8 archetypes best describe your approach to this stage of life and what that means for your next chapter. It only takes a few minutes, and your results may surprise you. Find out your archetype now. It's quick, it's fun, and it might help you see your journey in a whole new light. Take the Pathfinder quiz at meawisdom.com/quiz. It's like a portfolio of purposes.
Good way of putting it.
So 2 other P words. So you've got, what happens for us often in our 20s, 30s, and 40s is we have these 3 elements. You've got the profession, you've got the parenting, along with the partner, and that dominates your life.
Right.
And then we get into our 50s and 60s, and we move out of the time scarcity or time poverty era into a little bit more time affluence. And maybe it's not, as Richard Leiter, one of our faculty members, says, it's not the big P or the big P's in your life. It's the small P's. And we're not, don't go there, you people who are listening. I know that this is an issue as we get older, is sometimes we have big P's and small P's, but the idea of a series, a portfolio of purposes. You can have multiple things. You can be a marathon runner in your 70s. You can actually decide that you want to focus on photography. You have some latitude to not be so one-dimensional.
Yeah, and I think that the other thing is you can do all of those at any age. So I love the recent story in the Wall Street Journal about the new age of entrepreneurialism, people in their 70s. because launching a business in your 70s, you can have a 20-year run in that business or whatever. And so, yeah, I think that's a great way of framing it. So life layering, which is the action plan, is building those layers and that muscle so that you're not, and we all know this story, the higher you are in the corporate world, the harder it is post CEO life. Because when you're a CEO or a C-suite executive and you're sitting in those lofty chairs and all the things that go with it, you get weaned into a very, a state.
You go from being a VIP to a PIP, a previously
That's
important
right,
person.
That's right. And so, really being prepared for that time. We all know the story of the guy or the woman, but mostly men, who 2 years out, they're dead because, they just lost their way and they atrophy mentally, physically.
Retirement has, the data is conclusive. Retirement actually accelerates your mortality rate.
Right. So that's why we like the rewiring process.
Yeah.
Always rewire, always reimagine. It should be a never-ending process. And when I wrote Roar, and we'll get to the last R, I ended up interviewing 40 people that we end up calling them the reimagineers, the people who are walking the walk and talking the talk. And I was so inspired by their stories because they've done, and I wasn't that interested in people who were bankers who became banking consultants, which is fine.
Yeah.
I was interested in the woman who at 56 decided to go to veterinary school, and I went to her graduation when she was 60 at vet school, and she said, I'll be a vet for 20 years, or the guy who was a CEO of a hospitality group who decided that he was going to become an organic farmer and built out organic farms and then built out programs for companies to bring their employees to learn about, good food and healthy food. And so people who really did a whole reinvention, that's what inspired me, because I think people, and a lot of times people say, well, I don't know what I want to do. I'm stuck. I'm lost. I don't know what to do. And so we have a toolkit for life layering as ways that you can find your path. And
how would somebody find that? You'd find it in...
Some of it's in the book.
Okay.
Some of it, we do. You mentioned we're a B2B company.
Yeah.
We do lots of webinars and programs with companies for their
they
employees.
Can find this at roarforward.com.
Roarforward.com. Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's been really inspiring to watch people respond to it.
Yeah. And people came to this workshop.
Yes, which is what we're doing.
This is exactly what we're doing here at the MEA campus in Santa Fe. So let's go to the R, the final R.
So the final R is about relationships, because the midlife moment, we've accumulated a lot of relationships, many of them good, many of them not so good. Yeah. And I always use the analogy of that college friend who you met and you've been friends with, who's the most toxic person in your life for one reason or another. In our business, we have a word called editing, and you got to edit those people out.
Yep.
You've got to find the people who will support you in your endeavor. I met a woman who has raised 4 kids, and she wanted to go back to college and start a college. She never went to college. She wanted to get a college degree, and she wanted to start, her own career. And all her friends were like, well, why do you want to do that? Why do you want to do that? And she had to find the people who are like, that's awesome. That's amazing. And so rewiring, using that word again, your friendship, and that might also include family, is to build the support system that's going to be the lift for you to go to the places where you want to go. And that's really important. And we go through a variety of exercises on how do you sort of assess that. One of them is, this great question, which is a sobering question, but who are the 3 people that you want around your deathbed? And if you think about that,
and that's an amazing question.
It's an amazing question because it gets you to the core of who are the most important 3 people in your life.
Yeah.
And then you may go to 5, you may go to 7, but let's start with the 3. And, there were moments where a spouse said, well, I don't want my spouse at my deathbed, which was really interesting to me. But that's sort of the core group that you start with. And it's important, also when you're 50, you become a different person, an
Mm.
accumulation of your life experience. Who are the new people you let in?
Mm.
And the people that you let in at 50 will maybe not be the same people you let in at
No.
25. My great story is when I was looking for a new doctor, when I was in my, I really didn't have a primary care physician per se, which was a mistake.
Mm.
But I went to get a colonoscopy when I was, 45 or so,
Yeah.
because that's an important thing for everybody to do. And I
It's
asked,
a rite of
it's a
passage.
total rite of passage, and all was good, knock on wood.
Yeah.
But so this was now, I was 50-ish, and I asked the doctor who, I said I need a primary care physician. So he introduced me to a guy. I went in New York, and I went to see him. I had my first, full fitness exam or whatever it is, annual exam. And we started talking, and I found out he was a runner.
Mm.
And I'm like, well, I'm a runner. But anyway, it led to us going to do a loop in Central Park.
Mm.
Anyway, he's become one of my best friends. He's run 87 marathons. He's a maniac. He did 50 marathons in 50 states. A group of us went to Anchorage for his 49th, and then to Maui for the 50th.
Oh my God.
We've run many marathons together, and 2 years ago, he and another friend and I did the 9-day hike to the Everest base camp, and then ran the Tenzing Hillary Everest marathon down.
So it's 26.2 miles down.
Well, it's actually up and down.
It is up and down.
It's a weird. Many people say, "Oh my God, you ran up and then you came down." When you go up to the base camp, you're actually going up and down and sideways and around and up and down. It's a very circuitous route. So
going up.
And the same thing coming down.
Oh, okay,
so you're actually running up hills as you're coming down.
Oh, at 20,000 feet.
Oh yeah. It's
under
not,
the sea.
So,
oh my
so
God.
there I am, and you spend the night at base camp, which is the most miserable night of your life. And I'm sharing like a pup tent with Keith, who's my doctor. Thank God I'm with my doctor.
Wait,
here.
how long ago was this? This was your 70th?
My 70th birthday.
So a couple years ago.
70th birthday. I wrote a story for Men's Health Magazine on the experience for anybody who wants to be
We'll
do
it.
it.
Put it in the show notes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Once again, I say to people, you don't have to do that, but you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you're healthy and all
so
the
this
things.
is the growth mindset.
The growth mindset.
So we were talking about this in the classroom yesterday, and the idea that you can improve and you can learn at any age,
Right.
and that's really part of who you are. And does that ever tire you out, or do you feel like maybe you're juggling too many balls at once? Or
I think that everyone asks me when I'm doing keynotes and lectures and going around the country and the world now, they'll say, "Is this nature or nurture?" And I think it's a bit of both. I think that nature. I think there are certain people. I was always this way. Even when I was a kid, I was also always, to use the word multitasking. We didn't have that word at the time, but I was always doing lots of different things, and I was always curious about the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So I think it was part of my nature.
Yeah.
But I think that a lot of the nurturing that worked for me, I always tell people I came from a place that had an empty bucket, and I wanted to fill the bucket.
Yep.
And so the motivation and the ambition and drive that I had was the nurturing of my reimagination process.
Mm-hmm.
When I went to New York at 22 with $60 in my pocket and no contacts and a couch to sleep on for 2 weeks or so, 2 months actually, I had to find my way. I had to reimagine myself. I had to, how do I start? So I think I was a bit of an iconoclast, because I didn't, a lot of people stay in the safety of their family hometown or the structure of, marrying their college sweetheart. And then they stay and they buy a house and they have it. When you go and you turn it upside down, you have to be always thinking about, how do I move forward? So I think part of that's the nurturing process.
And in the 4 years since the book came out, since Word came out, have you had any new observations and insights?
It's a great question. Yes, the observation is there is a huge awakening that people are having in their lives at 50, that they are going to possibly live another 40 years.
So this is your next book?
Yes, there's a new book coming out on May 5th. Thank you very much for all you people who love pre-ordering.
Yeah.
It's a book. This book, which is a little less personal development, is really about the longevity phenomena. I interviewed 80 people doctors, technologists, higher education, travel, people who are, I call the longevity innovators, who are building the industry and the coalescing of those industries to create, the title of the book is Longevity Nation, to create a longevity nation. And that has both literal and metaphorical explanation to it. And it's the people, the ideas, and the trends that are driving the second half of our lives and being able to live. And Chip Conley and MEA is in that book because I always view you as a longevity innovator
Thank
and
you.
one of the big voices. And what I tried to do is capture the people who are doing the work. And I also do a great nod to the OGs of longevity, like our friend Laura Karstensen,
Oh,
who
we are
is
on her advisory board together.
exactly the founder of the Stanford Center on Longevity, and she wrote the foreword for the book.
Beautiful.
And I had her read the book because I needed her validation.
Oh, for sure.
So there are a lot of people like Laura who've been on this path long before it hit the zeitgeist.
That's right.
And now it's in the zeitgeist.
So, and what do you think led to this zeitgeisty thing? I mean, because one of the things we talked about in the classroom yesterday is if you look at sort of the new overlords of longevity, it's usually men, and it's a lot of them are between about 45 and 52 at the low point of the U curve of happiness.
Right.
And they're good people. I mean, Peter Attia, Andrew Huberman, Dave Asprey, Tim Ferriss. But it's an interesting thing that they're all right around age 50.
Yeah.
And they tend to focus more on the biohacking side of
Right.
things. What is your observation on the broader picture?
Yeah.
Because that's where a lot of the press has come from.
For sure.
As well as all of the billionaires,
For sure,
from the Google founders to Sam Altman, who are all spending fortunes to actually look at innovation around this.
Right.
But and then you hear Becca Levy
Yeah.
or Laura Karstensen or Dan Buettner from
Right.
Blue Zones, who's
Right.
a faculty member of ours, and realize like, well, there's this whole social science side.
Yeah.
It's not just the physical science side of longevity, but there's the social science has proven for decades or centuries that there's actually things that have nothing to do with your biometrics.
Right. You're right that, Peter with Outlive and the huge success of Outlive and Andrew Huberman and others have put it on the popular culture map, let's say. And their voices have been, leading voices. And I obviously mention and talk about them in the book. But what I was really interested in this book is who are the voices that we're not hearing? And who are the female voices that we're not hearing?
Right.
And there are a huge army of people who are in so many different aspects of the longevity sector that are doing amazing work, that are in the social science world, in the academic world, in the travel world, in the creative world. And I was really interested in getting way beneath the surface to find those people and bring them to the table, so to speak. And, some of them, a lot of them are new voices that are emerging and a lot of them are within organizations. Jennifer Garrison, who you might know, who is at the Buck Institute, is an amazing doctor who is working and doing amazing work in the Buck Institute on longevity. Certainly everything that is in Dr. Catherine Saunders, who is one of the top voices in the GLP-1 phenomena. I mean, the GLP-1 phenomenon is revolutionary, as you know, and it's only the beginning of what is going to be a massive shift in medicine. I was on the Stanford campus. I met this guy named Dr. Ranjan Naj, who I was so intimidated to go meet him because he's got like 6 degrees from MIT and Stanford and so forth. And he's working on a moonshot project for a pill to slow down the aging process. And there are some medications already, as you know, with the metformin trials and so forth. But this is, he's doing deep work in an academic setting, and he doesn't have this big public profile, but that is a radical idea. Who knows where it will end up? But I wanted in this book to raise the voices of a lot of different people. I wanted to show that this is a phenomenal global industry that is coming together. And it's all a response and reaction to this idea that we're all going to live to be 100.
Yeah.
And when people say to me, well, I don't know if I want to live to be 100. I don't know if 100 is a good thing. I say, well, go back to 1935. when people were 60, 62 life expectancy, if you said to them, you're going to live to be 80, they would go, well, I don't want to live to be 80.
Right, right.
Well, living to be 100 is going to be normalized.
Yeah.
We may not experience it, but the next generations will experience it. And the Stanford work says that the 5-year-old today has a 50% chance to live to be 100.
Exactly.
So this is going to be a real phenomena. Life expectancy in Asia with women is already 90-ish.
Yeah.
So this is medicine and AI in combination going to propel this even further. It's here.
It is here. And yet in the United States, longevity nation, 40 years ago, we were number one in the world for longevity. Today, we're 48th in the world. Why has the U.S. gotten it so wrong?
Well, we haven't addressed it for starters. We
Yeah.
haven't addressed it through all of our institutions. We haven't addressed it in government. We haven't addressed it in higher ed. We haven't addressed it in, everyday, the work world. We haven't addressed it at all. I mean, it's really the systemic challenges that we have. We're going to be playing big catch up. And if you go to the UK or you go to Scandinavia or Germany, or we talked about Asia, you really see what is in the works on that front. And
is it what do you on that front? That means more plentiful healthcare available.
Part of it,
less like death by despair, which is suicide, alcoholism, drug addiction. What else?
Yeah. So in France, there is something called the Charter that now 25 to 30 companies have signed to rethink their employee base, particularly their 50 plus employee base. And
rethink the benefits they get? Or
no.
Okay.
Yes and no. Yes and yes. But the yes is certainly on the benefit side. Menopause services, caregiving services are all part of that life stage. But more importantly, they have a commitment to their 50 plus employee to extend their work life so that they can work longer, earn longer, be healthier longer, have a longer runway before they check out at a certain age and then live beyond that. So L'Oreal, who's one of our clients, has a project called L'Oreal for All Generations, in which they're committed to retraining, upskilling, hiring, and promoting people over 50. Because the way the business world was structured before is you started saying at 60, let's start thinking about how we're going to move them out, right?
Yep.
Because of all the reasons we know. And so they're flipping it on its head and saying, how do we keep them working longer?
Now let's talk about that a minute for a second, because a couple of years ago, Macron was actually trying to increase the age, the retirement age from 62 to 64, and there are like people in the streets like. So it's interesting that this is happening in France.
Yeah, exactly.
Because in the United States, we think of France as like, oh, those people take 8 weeks of vacation a year and they retire at 42 or whatever. No, but what you're saying is the corporate world in France is saying, we know we have a demographic challenge here because we are not, having enough babies to keep up with our population needs, and we have immigration issues, so we're having a harder time to bring new people into the country. So we actually have to have people working longer.
Absolutely. And in the US, 10,000 people a day turn 65. We're in peak 65 year, as you know. There are 60 million people 65 plus in this country, which will go to 80 million by 2040 because of longevity and lifespans. And the challenge that companies have is the pipeline of people below all of these people are exiting their careers. There aren't enough people.
Right.
And by the way, some people say, well, AI is going to solve that. I'm not so sure because of a lot of the skills that are being lost. And the other side of the equation is, there's a huge deficit need with the trades, plumbers and electricians and
or healthcare workers,
workers,
caregivers.
Exactly. So you have this crisis, and so some companies in the U.S., L'Oreal being one, and others have this. CVS is another good example. Have this approach now that how do we keep people longer? One of the major banks that we work with. One of the presidents of this bank said to me, our wealth strategists are our IP. These are seasoned, experienced wealth strategists who help individuals build their asset base. If they walk out the door, we lose that institutional knowledge and that 30, 40 years of experience. I want that person to work into their 70s. And by the way, that's the kind of job you can work into your 70s. I mean, you can work as a wealth strategist or a stockbroker forever if you want.
Yeah.
So, that's part of, I just met a guy, I wrote about him in our newsletter. We have a newsletter every month, as you know.
Yep.
And I met this guy. I was asked to come and speak at Columbia University's wealth management master's program. And I met a guy named Dave Harrison, who is a 787 Dreamliner captain for United Airlines. And he is forced to retire at 65.
Yeah.
And he is going strong. And, there's been a lot of push-pull on raising the retirement age for commercial pilots. And plus, there aren't enough commercial pilots. That's a whole other story. It is what it is at the moment. That age will probably grow. But he said, I'm 65 and I'm completely motivated and ambitious and driven. And he's gone back to school to get a master's in wealth management. And he said, I want to become a wealth manager for other pilots, for people in my profession, and I want to do this for the rest of my life. I'm like, bingo, you're my guy.
Reimagineer.
You're my guy.
Right
Yeah,
there.
Exactly.
So I've two last questions, Michael. So one is what you're seeing on the horizon, because you're at a perch where you're seeing more than almost anybody in the world in terms of new products, new services, MEA being the world's first midlife wisdom school. What gets you excited about what you're seeing on the horizon in terms of the kinds of products and services that are being created for this longevity revolution? Great
question. And obviously I'll write a lot of that coming out in the book, but I'll pick two or three things. One was this phenomena of what I'm going to call longevity clinics. And longevity clinics, which are emerging, and some of the companies are Fountain Life and Next Health and Chi Longevity. And they're emerging as, I would say, next generation primary care physician facilities. You go into the clinic and there are doctors and nurses, and you're getting all sorts of tests, biomarker tests, a lot of it. There's a whole menu of things that you can get. And I wrote a story for Men's Health on this, and a lot of doctors kind of, raise their eyes around it. But it's serving a community of people who A, don't have a primary care physician, B, can't get a primary care physician, C, can't get an appointment with a primary care physician, and D, only get 15 minutes with the primary care physician when they can. And when I interviewed on the ground the people who were staffing it and doing it, what was shocking to me was that the majority of their clients are in their 40s.
Interesting.
And I would have thought that they would have been in their 60s. And there's this next generation of people in their, let's call them in their 40s, younger millennials and so forth, who are being much more proactive about their health care and also tapping into technologies to get information and solutions about their health care. And I think that's going to be really emerging as a new service. Products like MEA, I mean, you have a very unique niche. I mean, there's really no one else that does what you do. So get ready for some competition. Somebody's going to say, "Wait a minute." But exactly, bring it on.
We really would. No, we want to be
bring
a catalyst. I'd love to see midlife wisdom schools all around the world.
No kidding. I think it's a great idea. But the only other place where it exists, as you know, is in the academic world. Through the post-career programs and now the midlife programs in universities.
Which are called like Stanford Distinguished Careers Institute and Harvard.
Chicago,
ALI.
And those are great, but they're different. They're just very different.
They're a year-long commitment.
Right.
You have to have a lot of time and money to be able to do it.
But that's a product. The other thing that I would say is the whole longevity travel phenomena is just blowing up everywhere. I mean, it's being integrated into so many of the established spas now, the medical treatments that you can have. And I don't mean it's medical light. So it's like biomarker, biohacking stuff. But I think you're familiar with the estate that Sam Nazarian and Tony Robbins are doing. To me, that is like really a big idea. And this is creating longevity residential communities.
So that's sort of what we're going to be
doing some of that here,
We'll
right?
be doing that
Right.
in Santa Fe
That's
with our
right.
campus there,
Yeah.
as opposed to our ranch campus
Yeah.
outside of Santa Fe.
And at CES, there is now a whole, I'll call it Age Tech Pavilion, which are all.
And CES is the Consumer
Electronics Show in Las Vegas.
Yep.
I'll be there this January moderating a panel on longevity, age tech, and there's so many products now, a lot of them being created through AI applications for sleep, for blood pressure, for you name it. It's medical. So there's this like massive growth curve happening across the longevity sector in many areas that will be primarily work their way down to the consumer level. And it is wearables being, a great example. And so I think you're going to see more and more of this, emerge, and huge investment dollars going into all aspects of longevity.
Yeah. Last question. Wisdom. A question I asked you in the classroom yesterday. So let's say someone younger, a young Michael Clinton who's got the aspirations to be you someday and wants to tap into that wisdom, says to you, I'd love to have tea or coffee with you next week. Could you come with a wisdom bumper sticker and an origin story? What might be that piece of wisdom that you have learned, maybe the hard way, because often wisdom is the painful life lessons that has turned into the raw material of wisdom. What's the piece of advice or wisdom that has your unique fingerprints all over it?
I think I thought about this since we talked yesterday.
Yeah.
And I think where I would go and I would say is be true to yourself. Because first of all, in the big picture, and the famous book, The 5 Regrets of the Dying.
Yes.
The number one lesson that I always take away is that most people, it was a hospice nurse who sat with people who were leaving the planet. And the number one thing that always resonated with me is people said, I wish I'd been more true to myself. I wish I had really been the one who listened to my own inner ear. And oftentimes I say to people, they're going to go and work and do something in a career or business that they're really not excited about, but their parents have pushed them into because, go be an investment banker because you make a lot of money and then blah, 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 blah. And they just don't want to be an investment banker. And so how do you be true to yourself and how do you push back on the forces that are doing that? And at the same time, and I pride myself on this as a self-evaluation, when I was going through the ranks, rising in the ranks in the publishing world, I always kept my own bearings about my authenticity, my honesty, my integrity. I was very careful not to get sucked into what could have sucked me into some of the trappings of my world. And that to me was being true to myself. And it really, I think, opened up the future for me and got me to the places that I got to.
Yeah.
So that would be my answer.
Long ago, Oscar Wilde said, be yourself, everyone else is taken.
That's right.
You are an iconoclast, Michael Clinton. Thank you for being an inspiration to me.
And vice versa.
Yeah, we are on this, we're sort of parallel paths.
Yeah.
And that's always reassuring when you can see someone else out there, being the pioneer that you are. And it gives me more confidence that I can do what I'm doing. So
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I know, like, when I'm talking with someone like Michael, time just flies by, and he's an inspiration for me. He's about 7 or 8 years older than me, and he is in his early 70s, both in terms of his physical fitness, but also in terms of his mental and emotional fitness. He's a role model, and so I really appreciated having the conversation with him while we were actually teaching a workshop here in Santa Fe. So let's start with the first lesson, which is ROAR. I mean, let's put it out there. ROAR stands for reimagine, own your age, act, and then reassess your relationships. And I think that it's a very simple model. I think that one of the things that I appreciate is it's easy to remember, not just because of the acronym, because the idea of being a reimagineer. This is a term that he used in the workshop that we just taught, but he also uses it in his book and in his newsletter, which I highly recommend you subscribe to. It's free. To actually reimagine oneself is one of the most important things we can do as we get older, is to say, I have been this and now I can be that. Which brings me to my second lesson. Michael he's a role model for mindset, for how to have a growth mindset, how to actually go out and run marathons in his 70s and doing it on 7 continents, how to shift and write a book in his late 60s and then create a company that's been very successful in the B2B space around longevity and aging, and just really have a point of view, which is you don't know when you're going to die. So with each day, you do everything you can to live. You seize the day. And he's a seize the day kind of guy. Thirdly, there's 2 UK professors who wrote a book a few years ago called The 100-Year Life. It was probably one of the first books that really took on the topic of longevity. Michael is helping us to see that if we're going to live a 100-year life, and more of us will, in fact, we have 5 times as many centenarians in the United States today than we did in 2000. And according to demographers, we will have 5 times as many centenarians in the year 2050. So how do you curate a life when you know you're going to live a long time? And living a long time, if you're not healthy, is not a good thing. And so what I really appreciate about his model, the Roar model, but also his way of thinking about physical health, is that you want to actually, as Peter Attia has shown, you want to actually think about what are the things you're going to want to do at 80 or 90, whether that's making sure you can put a bag up in the baggage container in an airplane, or you can throw your grandchild up in the air, or you can actually stretch and get off the ground by yourself without actually having to use your arms. These are the kinds of things we want to do as we get older. And Michael has really shown in his book and in his behavior and in his newsletter just how we can think of longevity as being something that is essential in terms of living a long time. So it's not just that we actually have lifespan, that we actually have health span as well. So what a great episode. I'll see you on the next episode, and hope to see you in Baja or Santa Fe soon enough.
Thanks for listening to the Midlife Chrysalis. This show is produced by Midlife Media. If you enjoyed this episode, help us spread the word by subscribing and leaving a review on your favorite platform.